Hello everyone! Welcome to this video about the book Botchan, written by Natsume Soseki. The video will be in charge of Cristian Chilatra, Esteban Yepes, Felipe Alba, Alexandra Prada, Freddy Santamaria, and Kelly Rivera. This is an insightful and interesting work. It's one of the most hilarious and entertaining novels that represent a classic of modern Japanese literature. In this book, Soseki uses humorous situations that sometimes border on the absurd to paint a social environment in which the traditional values founded by Japanese culture, such as honor, equity, and justice, were being replaced by others based on personal success, superficiality, and greed. Throughout the video, we will see some challenges of Botchan as a teacher and situations that make us see the customs of the region and the age. This is a piece inspired by life of the author, and next we are going to address essential aspects about this book. Let's move to the first one.
Natsume Soseki, better known as Natsume Kinosuke, was a Japanese writer and English teacher. Soseki was born into a family of civil servants descended from a run-down samurai family. His parents gave him for adoption to one of his servants at the age of 2. He lived with him and his wife until he was 9 years old. During 1886, he met and established friendship with Masao Kashiki, who introduced him to haiku's arts composition. There, he adopted the nickname of Soseki, a term with a Chinese origin that means stubborn. After 30 years old, he accepted an employment on the Shikoku Island, a very distant island considered out of civilization. This experience was criticized by his friends who told him that job was a complete isolation. Throughout these years, he experienced how some students were in opposition to him and considering them like rude students. This deep experience was crucial to write one of his best stories, Botchan, where he used a strong tone and sarcastic approach. Starting 20th century, he developed some studies in English philology, literature, and teaching. Therefore, his stylistic type of writing was permeated of sarcasm and takeoff. His first relevant story was I'm a Cat, where he displayed thoughts and ideas about how his environment system was having issues such as bureaucracy. Nevertheless, many humanistic topics are come up on issues such as bureaucracy, and he relates friendship between experienced critic, economic, social, and political transformation. However, his most significant masterpiece was Kokoro, which is considered a Don Quixote de la Mancha for Spanish speakers, Romeo and Juliet for English speakers. Due to this, it's basic for any Japanese to read it. His context during his writer life was permeated by experimenting on different areas of society, teaching, politics, public management, and isolation. Furthermore, Soseki's life had a transition in his life, having the opportunity to study in England and gaining knowledge further positioned on his experience as a provincial teacher, where he highlighted the critic of it.
Okay guys, hello, I hope you are doing well. I am Felipe Alba and I'm going to narrate you about the first half of the book Botchan. This story is developed in Japan, specifically in Tokyo, and in the era in which the Japanese imperialism is still existing. A woman, which in the story is mentioned as Kiyo, was the only one who started to take care of Botchan and to give him the love he didn't receive from his mother and his father. Kiyo was a person who worked from them in the house as a keeper. This woman has a big relevance in the story because she was the person who called Botchan to the protagonist. Kiyo was always referring to him as Botchan or Botchan, even after several years. Another thing important to mention about the protagonist was his behavior and impulsivity. It is mentioned in some occasions in which he did some dumb, stupid, and dangerous things. One of them, for example, was when he almost cut one of his fingers with a pocket knife, just to demonstrate to a classmate that it had edge. Now, as a result of that behavior, he chose a professional program in less than a minute because he saw a promotion in a university which was offering their programs very cheap, and he took that opportunity without thinking it carefully. After 12 years of study, he finished the program, and a classmate suggested him a place in which he could work as a math teacher, but out of Tokyo. It was in a province of Japan. He accepted the job in a very bad humor. Before going to the new job, he went to visit Kiyo in order to say goodbye to her, because he was the only person who trusted him during his entire life. Well, another important thing to mention about Botchan is that he was a very nagger person with other people, and he judged people as inferior or stupid. In this case, he started to put nicknames to the people who he would work with. Some of them were the director of the school, who he dubbed as Tanuki or Budget in English, the fellow mathematics teacher as Porcupine, the English teacher as Pale Squash, and the director's assistant he dubbed as Redshirt. When he started the classes, he felt weird and uncomfortable, because for him, the fact that students use the word teacher or cert in him was very weird, and even that put him nervous. In the first class, he tried to impose respect to the students, and as always, he started to critique students and treat them as dumps again. After some days, he had to do night duty in the school. That was mandatory for each teacher in the school. In that specific institutions, the students were living in rooms in the school, and they started to bother Botchan during the whole night. They put him grasshoppers in the bed, they did noise, among other things. And when he caught them, he started to yell them about that behavior until the sunrise. Being very tired and sleepy, he gave the classes normally at the next day, and Wretched invited him to go fishing to clear his mind. But in that trip, he and another teacher started to laugh from the situation he already had. Botchan pretended he did not listen to that conversation, but he was very angry because far away from helping him, they were gossiping about that. In that same trip, Reggie told Botchan not to trust in all the people of the institution, and he told him that not all were good people, and they were guilty that any new teacher wanted to be in that school. In other words, he started to condition their trust in other people. The first person came to Botchan's mind was Porcupine, because he was the person who recommended him another place to stay apart from the first hotel he arrived. After confirming his suspects, he faced Porcupine in the school, and they started to yell at each other, and their relationship started to become unpleasant. But in the same day was a meeting of the teachers in order to discuss the penalty of the students who bothered Botchan the previous night. Incredibly, all the teachers, including the director, didn't want to give them an appropriate penalty. But the only person who defended Botchan and argued that the students deserved an appropriate sanction was Porcupine.
Summary Part 2 by Christian. Botchan was packing to leave the place, and then he started to walk without knowing where to go. Walking around hoping to find room to stay. Finally he got a place in an old woman's house named Hagino. After he was accommodated, he started to remind Kiyo on how it would be if they kept together. Things were better in the new place, and Hagino asked Botchan for his wife. So He answered that he wasn't married and asked her for help to find one. Hagino started by warning him from the women nowadays. Then she asked if he knew Madonna. So Hagino told him everything she knew and the connection with the teachers of the school. Once again, he realized how everything was known in that small town. Not only people suffer this lack of privacy, but also letters. The first letter from Kiyu was revised many times until it arrived in Botchan's hands. The letter contained some advice. One of the things that Botchan missed from Kiyo was her food, because in his new home he didn't feel comfortable with his diet. Then, in the school, Botchan saw the Madonna for the first time, a gorgeous woman that had more than one fellow. In a bright moon, Botchan was walking home and discovered that Rachel was with Madonna, the woman of another teacher. However, the next day, Rachel denied everything, so Botchan didn't trust him anymore. Richard invited Botchan to his beautiful house. Richard offered Botchan a higher position to gain more money and send Squash far away. However, everything was a Richard plan to marry Madonna. The day to say goodbye to Squash arrived, so all the teachers organized a party. After the party, Botchan told everything about Richard's plan to Porcupine, and Porcupine was not happy and decided to stop Richard's plans. The party was at Kashintei, the best restaurant in town. Badger wore an expensive kimono. Richard also was in Japanese dress. Squash was in a beautiful kimono, and Botchan was in a European style suit. The same wore the physical education teacher. After some words of goodbye, it was time to eat, while the geishas arrived. 1 week after the squash goodbye party, there was a holiday, so there was no class. Botchan and Porcupine met under an orange tree outside Botchan Place. Suddenly, the younger brother of Richard came to invite Porcupine to a dance, so Porcupine invited Botchan. The streets were full of people. After watching the special dance, the young boy came to notify a fight of 90 students of Botchan School against 60 or 50 of another. Porcupine and Botchan trying to stop them until the police arrived and the teachers were hurt. 3 days later, a newspaper published that Botchan and Porcupine had started the fight. So Botchan had to leave the school. Then they remembered the invitation to the dance. Everything was a Richard plan. After that, Porcupine and Botchan moved to a place near to a hotel to cut Richard with his geisha. About a week they waited for it, until Kosutsu came. Richard and Clown started to laugh and make fun of Botchan and Porcupine's absence. Then Botchan and Porcupine fought Clown at Richard until they were face to face. So Porcupine and Botchan asked them why they were doing what they say teachers weren't supposed to do. Botchan carried eggs for breakfast in his pocket and put them on Clown's head. And Porcupine hit Richard 2 times. After that, Porcupine and Botchan left Shikoku. They say goodbye to each other at Shimbashi Station and never saw again. Then Botchan and Kiyo met again. Botchan decided to live in Tokyo with Kiyo as his servant until she died. Before her death, she told Botchan to put her with Botchan's family, so she could wait for Botchan in Kogenji Temple in Tokyo.
Following the structure of the components, the following stylistic characteristic is important in terms of narration and drama of the story. Description. Many of the situations presented in the book carry out learners to identify some descriptive aspects. The way in which the author tells the story puts reader into a world of images because in each part where some descriptions are made, the reader starts to imagine and create a physical image in his or her mind. The way in which the author describes the other teachers, mentioning their attitudes, their physical appearance, their emotions, and their ways of thinking, is the main characteristic of his style. Not only that, but also how he describes the other characters' appearance and attitudes. Before going to work to a new city, he emphasized his thought to her nana and his family. For this reason, description is one of the most important aspects of this story. Suspense. During the development of the story, suspense is one of the most notable and essential characteristics. The story starts by telling us the situation which happened in the past of the main character. He tells how he felt when he was a child, what he did while he was studying, and how was the relationship between he and his family. For this reason, it carries out learning to think about the main author's future, without knowing what will happen, and stimulate readers to create images about the development of the story. The feelings, emotions, ideas, and situations mentioned in the book motivate readers to be inside or to be part of the story, with the aim to continue reading, guess, analyze, and identify the next situation. The reader is always developing general ideas about the future of the character, creating suspense because the reader doesn't know what will happen. Language. As it is known, the book was first published in a Japanese language, and it has had some translation in different language too. The version we read has a formal language, it has an appropriate grammar and spelling, omitting possible misunderstanding of vocabulary and meanings. Also, the sentences are long and complex, without leaving out any incomplete idea, creating suspense. Some words or ideas are not repeated in the story because there is no need to carry out readers to read the same always and making the book boring. Finally, the information is presented in an organized way and it has coherence, mentioning that some situations pass from the present to the past, doing some specifications and emphasis in the story.
We can say that Botchan is narrative because the main character was involved in almost every aspect of the story. Besides, the story was told in first person, so the actions that occur in the story are seen through the eyes of the person who is narrating. In the book, Botchan is telling us what happened in his childhood with Kiyo and the relation that he had with his relatives. Like this, we can perceive during the whole story that Botchan led us on a journey with his personal biases and feelings. In Botchan, the use of satire is undeniable, given that the author used humor and irony for referring to Botchan's colleagues at the school. Once he met them, he gave them nicknames based on their appearance or the way they dressed. Thus, Botchan called the second master Red Shirt, the English master was the Green Pumpkin, the mathematics master was Porcupine, the art master was the Clown, and the headmaster was the Badger. In this section, we are going to talk about how the translation of the book from Japanese to English could rescue the Japanese essence without affecting the formality of the early 1900 Japanese. We are conscious of how many levels of communication the language has, and there are different ways of speaking for women, children, and status. There are even strictly Japanese words that cannot be translated, such as Botchan, but the English translators try to give the most accurate description without changing the exact meaning of the word in Japanese. Thus, translating a classical work that is well known in its country of origin is a wonderful way to build a bridge between cultures. Botchen is a beautiful piece of classical reading from another country in which you can gain information about the culture and its people.
Now, starting with the thematic discussion, we will talk about three main aspects. The first one is How a reckless and undisciplined person may end up being a good teacher? Well, at the beginning of a story, Botchan reflects on himself about how a reckless person like him could be a role model for students, and he will be required to conduct himself in such a way he will be looked up to by everyone in the school, but he thinks it's almost impossible due to his personality. Afterwards, he shows he could be a good teacher because he defends justice and truth. And just as an example, he agrees with Porcupine by saying, educating is not just imparting knowledge. Educating is also promoting noble and upright attitudes with its strong principles, implying that students should learn to have a disciplined behavior. This means that all the teachers have qualities that can be perceived as negative and that are far from what is intended to be an ideal teacher. Although a person may be undisciplined and reckless, he or she can become a good teacher because being a teacher requires many other skills and characteristics that support the student's development in the different aspects of their lives.
Now, moving on to the second thematic discussion, which is how the main character reflects his faith in honesty, integrity, and making the effort to do the right thing despite his personal flaws. I need to highlight the situation at the end of the book, at the final section of the book, in which Botchan and Porcupine started to talk and have more interaction, despite the problem they had in the school provoked by Botchan. In those final section of the book, it is very noticeable the differences that existed between Botchan and Porcupine. And despite some differences of behavior or attitude, they agreed in a problem they had, which was red shirt and their own loyalty and hypocrisy. The faith in each other was evident every time they planned something in order to punish red shirt and tell anyone about it. Their honesty in moments in which something bad happened and they told each other possible solution without betraying the other. And finally, the integrity could be appreciable in Botchan at the moment in which his salary was going to be increased, but affecting the job of a good and a nice person. So because of that, he rejected that increase of the salary. And another situation was at the end of the book when Botchan decided to renounce to the job just because Porcupine was fired that same day. So it is evident how despite the problem they had in the past, they make team in order to reach a general objective. We watch to punish red shirt.
How can differences in teacher and student personalities be positive and negative for teaching tasks? The differences between the personalities of the teacher and the students can play a crucial role because they must be developed in the most suitable way possible. A possible external conflict can occur, in addition, when both entities are not in tune. It can reach points or situations in which conflicts are generated. Differences should not only be a problem, since as human beings we are different. However, we must bear in mind that when a person is careerist like Botchan's character, he can generate negative reactions to those around him. Botchan in the book develops a pity attitude, which for others around him generated a problem. So many individuals like him must choose whether to adapt or try to function in the environment of difference, in which the task of teaching will be hampered by the speculation of behaviors and possible confrontations between the two parties. Botchan gives us a very important message in this regard, and that is that social and geographical differences can influence the development of certain activities such as classroom management, development of verbal and communicative skills, speech development, application development of resumes, etc. In conclusion, Botchan is a clear example of not all the time notable differences with students generate reactions that can affect our professional experiences, much more so when an effect of adaptability and assimilation is not sought.